Hi. Uh, that was aggressive. Welcome to Thank You Five. It is a weekly show hosted by Straw Dog Theater Company where we bring artists from around the globe in a conversation about live theater in a digital world with a spirit of gratitude and innovation. I'm Jannard Washington. I live in Chicago, Illinois, by way of Houston, Texas. I am a Straw Dog Theater Ensemble member, as well as a Bramble Theater Ensemble member. I've been here in Chicago for 10 years as an actor. I will hopefully dabble in directing and writing very soon, but we don't have that courage yet. We'll get there. Um, I have a couple of shows coming up that have not been announced yet, but keep your eyes out. Um, uh, Jan, welcome. Who tell us about yourself?
Thank you, Janard. Thank you for having me. I am Jan. Call me Jan. My legal, like professional, all the unions and stuff name is Janice L Blixt. I actually grew up in Chicago, but ended up going to Detroit for graduate school. And by doing that, ended up with a lot of Michigan connections. So I was actor, classical actor person, and then I began directing. So for the past 13 years, I've been the artistic director of the Michigan Shakespeare Festival. I'm an audiobook narrator. I have directed at this point like 66 productions. Because I'm mostly in classical theater, dead playwrights. I do a lot, by the way. I'm so sorry, playwrights out there. I love dead playwrights because I can mess with your work all I want. Um, but I do a lot of adaptations and a lot of translations from other languages. And yeah, but I am actually talking to you from Evanston, where my home is. And you in Evanston too?
I am in
Uh,
Evanston.
all right. My little ones who are not so little, 15 and 17, go to ETHS, and we are here. That's me. So I'm going to toss this over to Steve Peebles.
Hi, everybody. I am Steve Peebles. He, him, calling out of Lincoln Park in Chicago, Illinois. I grew up in Lisle in the suburbs, and then I spent so many years in Montana that people from here think I'm from there.
Truth.
I'm an actor. I'm a director. I tell stories. I yell in bars. There was 3 years that I wasn't doing that, so I'm still finding my identity. Uh, that was the pandemic. If you might have gone through a similar situation. Yeah, that's what I got. Peter, tell us about you.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm Peter. I'm calling in from Chicago in the Edgewater area. From San Francisco beforehand. I'm similar to Steve. I was out of theater for a bit during the pandemic, but been back at it as an actor for the past couple of years and been having a good time. Right now, I'm with Straw Dog doing Hanukkah and the Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblins. That's how you say
Yeah.
that. Um, and I suppose we're going on over, last but not least, to Shelley.
I suppose we are. I'm Shelley. I am also from Chicago. I like to say that I'm an interdisciplinary artist, but my primary baby is theater, of course. I freelance. I'm a company member and production manager with Idle Muse and have been for a very long time. And do a little bit of work all over the place, though not so much anymore. Because of a little thing you might have heard of called a pandemic. It might come up. But a little bit of other things as well. Some writing, some drawing, some painting, some other just stuff. So
Awesome. Now that we all four of us are met, let's start with our first question, which is what is theater? Um, this can be as specific or as broad, as jaded as you would like it to be. What is theater to you? Um, I'm gonna ask Shelley first.
oh god. Okay, cool. Um
Kind of
theater
a rude. That was a rude move of mine.
is
'Cause typically I answer it first, but
no, that's fair. I'll take it. Theater is a little bit of a lot of things, I think. I think it's community. I think it's conversation. I think it's, um, you know, retelling the Dead Playwright Society. I think it's a way to keep coming back to the roots. I think to keep coming back to what we loved, why we love it, why we do it, why we stay in it, despite all of the reasons not to, allegedly. But also, I think it's about endurance. I think it's about love. I think it's about storytelling. I there's I think it's everything. Um, I could get really deeply esoteric about it, but that would take the whole time, and that's not why we're here. So, but yeah, I think it's all of that and probably other stuff too. I don't know. A bunch of dead white guys wrote a bunch of stuff about it, right? But a lot of them didn't say any of that. So,
That's lovely. I love that. And you guys take as long as you want. Like there have been shows where we've answered it very what is theater very quickly, and sometimes it's like 45 minutes. I'm like, I gotta squeeze in a question. So this show is ours, y'all. I really do like that you when you said first when you said community, um, it immediately made me think like theater at its best, I think, is a safe space for an audience or a group of performers, designers, but what have you, to tell a story that um, sometimes is not so safe or where people are not being their safest
mhm.
um, in life because theater is typically the most exciting moments in somebody in characters' lives, but it's a place that allows dangerous things to happen, hopefully under some protection, or
Yeah,
some safety, where that's built, that's created, and that's understood by everyone in the room. And I think that's where I feel theater is for me today, and I feel like a lot of theater is trying to continue that sacred, safe space, and hopefully we get better and better. But I think at its best, it's we're able to be dangerous
yeah. But
safely.
it's like circus, but you don't see the net under the trick, but you trust that
Right.
it's there. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's the other people on stage with you, sometimes it's the people behind the stage, sometimes it's the people, you know, in the sort of administrative producing capacities. There's all of these sort of layers of that, and I think that that's really, really beautiful when it's done well. Yeah.
Anybody else?
I think mentioning the idea of circus, based on like the way I view theater, I would incorporate circus not as something separate from theater, but as a type. I don't know what your implication necessarily was, but for me, I mean, theater is gathering to share in storytelling, and I think that circus does that too.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
yeah, and I think for me the really important thing about theater is the gathering aspect. It's like what separates it from like TV or movies. You know, it's interactive with people there, people present. It's part of why I really didn't like Zoom plays when that was happening. Among other reasons to dislike Zoom plays, but uh, yeah, so that's where my thoughts are on that, I suppose. Um,
And I will
Janet?
have more to say about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jan.
No,
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 no.
no. You're cool,
Uh,
Steve. Something pulled you in.
I
Jump in.
I will have more to say about Zoom plays later because I think we all had a big percentage of our careers suddenly became online and disappearing as soon as the host closed the window.
Yep.
Um, but 100% hear you on Peter on, you know, it's the people in the room that is that lifeblood. It's the people in the room like having that experience. I talk a lot about theater being an engineered memory. Is people like people, you know, people go to see a play or they see a musical and they assign, you know, the same kind of respect to characters they can name by name as people in their extended family. Having that experience, being in the room for that, it resonates. It is, I think it is something that sticks with you. And if that's not happening, then theater's probably not doing its job. um I keep reading articles about how theater is in trouble, and I actually don't think it's theater's problem. I think theater is doing just fine. I've seen 4 plays in the last 2 weeks. I think theater is doing just fine. I don't think we're okay, and we are the ones making theater, and that is a harder conversation to have.
I think the people
Um,
writing those articles are not seeing the kind of theater that does the danger safety stuff, and that's the
mhm,
problem.
yeah, and I think that, the kind of theater that I think that artists are in like their rawest, most honest place right now, like industry wide, and that's before they get on stage. Like
Yeah.
we've all lived through a moment, and that's what everybody carries with them everywhere they go.
Right. Isn't that the
Everybody in
point?
America has never been better poised to be an artist because we're so
Truly.
raw and honest right now. But at the same time, like what theater's supposed to accomplish, or what art is supposed to do, enormous air quotes, what art is supposed to do. I don't think we're certainly not in a place where uh the people who put up theater feel comfortable experimenting. And I don't think that the effect is really there. The idea that you're supposed to discomfort the powerful, I think power is really tenuous right now, and power's not in a place where it can be appropriately challenged. And that's a problem too. I don't think it's a power first conversation, but like the idea of impact, I think is, uh, I question the effect of art right now because everybody's like so off kilter. I don't know what target you can hit right now with putting up a show.
I think to that point, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I think also art and theater has the aspect of levity and joy associated with it, and it's okay, and I think quite necessary right now to have some shows that are just fun and not necessarily designed to like target and challenge and whatnot. And I not that that's not important. I think it's incredibly important, but I think also just getting together and having some fun is a really important thing that theater offers too.
I kind of have
For
like the
sure. For sure.
I kind of have like the opposite thought on that though, where I
Mm,
think that getting together and working through some shit
mm,
is important. And I think that, taking some of those risks and some of those um doing darker work, doing realer, grittier stuff, people people come see it. People, yes, we've all gone through this collective global
Trauma.
literal trauma. There's a lot of real world stuff that even like the escapism of theater, I think people still want grounded in reality in a lot of ways. Um, and I think that having like, um, and talking about like that safe space and that community, being able to sit in a room with 40 or 50 other people and have that emotional experience of that together, I think can be really powerful. And I think that
Absolutely.
where all of those articles about, oh no, theater's in trouble. I mean, yeah, if you're going to go see The King and I for the 4,000th time for $500, yeah, you're in trouble. But if you're, doing what a lot of Chicago does and has been doing, then that's a completely different conversation. That's a completely different animal. We were talking before
True.
we went live about like the way that you know, college programs don't prepare you for how like the real world necessarily functions. They take you sort of from like, you know, BA to Broadway, but they don't even tell you that like storefront theater is an option, right? And then
Yeah.
you have this
Yeah.
beautiful world, this beautiful community that has nothing to do with, you know, winning Tony Awards and, you know, being on the West End and being in, you know, a coastal city right here. And I think that that is so great. I'm biased. I'm from
I
here. But like,
no, I agree. I agree completely. I am directing a show right now in Detroit, at Wayne State University. Murder on the Orient Express opens February 2nd for anyone who's in the deep.
eh,
Um, but it is Wayne State students, and so they are at the point of graduating, and most of what goes on at their college is stuff that is taught by their professors and, you know, part of academia. So I get absolutely tons and tons of questions about what this thing is that we do. And also, as in my job as an artistic director, they send me out constantly to be the face to get, you know, the tomatoes thrown at when I'm asking for money, and everyone's saying, why are we going to give this money to you? Justify yourself in 500 words is kind of the, you know, the way it is. I would say theater is, first of all, a craft. And that craft is one of the most amazing freaking things in the world, because it is a combination of the words and the bodies and the circus, what you were talking about, Shelley, absolutely, and musicality and rhythm and bodies in space and all of the stuff that people want to throw at you with viewpoints and everything else. It is this, all of these things come together to create a story, and that's theater. That's the craft of it. That's kind of, I think, what all of us who are on this call, that's what we do. The actors and the directors and the designers and the choreographers and the musicians and the everybody, when we pull it together. And it is life affirming, and it is internally sometimes deeply painful. It is raw, and it is real, and it is wonderful. It is also, once we've moved from craft to art, I have a hard time, because I tell my students all the time, you're not creating an art. Art isn't something you can do. Art is what happens when we bring audience into it and the communion happens. It's what you were talking about in terms of community, in terms of the experience and the safe space. That communion, you know, to use religious iconography, because historically that's kind of what we do, that is that connection. And that is, I think, when sometimes art happens, and it's amazing, and it is something to strive for, and it doesn't happen all the time, and don't beat yourself up, because sometimes it won't, but when it does, oh my God, it makes everything worthwhile. And that is the safe space that we're talking about. It is the empathy. Like, the purpose of theater is to allow 100 people, 50 people, 500 people to sit in a room and experience something that they're not experiencing in life. And because of that, they suddenly have empathy for something other than themselves. And I think that that is what guides humanity to hopefully be better. So there's hope, and there's love, and there's care. And then the third rail. Oh, sure.
Oh, sorry. No. Go.
I was then going to say, but then there's the third rail of theater, and that's the industry. And I feel like the industry is an abusive relationship that I've been in for 30 years, where I pour in my love and my time and my energy. And sometimes I get rewarded, and sometimes I get punched in the face. And with pandemic happening the way it's happened, I think so many of us are feeling that punch in the face a little stronger than we've ever felt it before. It has caused a lot of people to leave our industry. That said, I am so proud, and I keep telling the students in Wayne State University's Murder on the Orient Express opens February 2nd. I keep telling the students that the industry is changing. And what I came up in 30 years ago as a young, a hot actor, where the misogyny and the racism and the destructive way of utilizing talent was the only way the industry could exist is to make sure nobody got paid what they were worth other than the people at the top. That was, the way it was. It's not fixed. Please don't ever think that I'm saying that it is. But it's getting better. It's getting better through things like what we were talking about before, Not in Our House, through intimacy training, through the fact that artists and designers, actors and designers, all of the artists who are involved in the craft, remember back there, are starting to learn that it's okay to set boundaries and to say no. But our industry is really dying with the fact that it is so much harder to make a living. It is so much harder to think of a future where a paycheck is coming in. And I don't want to be the downer on that one, but that is one that we can make the choice that that's not important, and that's cool. I'm good with that. I'm fine with that. I do. I understand it. But it's also something that we need to tell young artists. It's getting harder and harder. So anyway, what is theater? That is my thesis of the 3 stool points of theater. And sorry, you were going to jump in here with a comment.
I was just going to maybe like 3 people back. Both. I know. Well, what y'all were saying was so great. But I wanted, as far as like being an audience member, in the theater, I would say a few weeks to a month ago, I saw Chicago Shakespeare's production of Twelfth Night.
Oh god.
Had a fabulous experience. And Shelley, I'm with you. I typically find myself where you are, where it's like I need to learn something. I need to be crawling through the mud and learning a lesson. All of us need to be, certainly now, I feel like we need to figure this shit out because I'm not going to be miserable forever. Let's teach me theater. But I saw Twelfth Night and I found myself so taken away, like, or just like transfixed with the performance and just, I don't know if it seems like some of you have seen it, like just looking at other audience members just being so happy and joyous and like it was just really nice, to be in that room full of joy, just like hopping, bouncing around and like, just all around everywhere. So
It was the most fun I've had in an audience in 30 years.
Fuck yeah.
No shade to anybody, in the chat or at home or whose work I see on the regular. Like, look, that was the first time I've seen a show and not been sitting there going, why? Like,
yeah.
I had no notes.
Well, I had an absolute blast. It was the joy, the communion, everything. I'm totally with you. But then the next weekend I saw POTUS at Steppenwolf and I went, I'm so happy. I'm so happy I saw this.
Yeah.
This crazy, ridiculous, for those of you who don't know, it's a statement about like the 7 women who are trying to keep this idiot of a president in office. So it's his chief of staff, his wife, his sister, his secretary, his girlfriend. Exactly. But it was dark and it was dirty and it was cynical. And I thought, I don't want to lose the glow. The glow, the happy glow that I had from this. But I walked out of there going, no, that works. I'm still so
Still
happy.
glowing.
I'm still glowing, even though it was dark and cynical. So what you're saying is so true. It's someone made a comment, and I wanted to say that you therapy can't happen for people who don't want therapy to happen.
Mm-hmm.
How do we convince people who don't think theater is what it is to go?
You know, I don't know that it is. I think that if something is good enough, and I think with the right publicity, people will go. I think, like you back in the day, there was Wicked, there's Hamilton now, there's going to be something, there's going to be all types of shows that bring people who typically don't find themselves in the theater to the theater.
Mm-hmm.
I think more specifically, I think, and maybe I may be taking the momentum of your question incorrectly, but like I feel like as artists, we are like we want you to see this type of show. We want you to see see the shows that are going to change society, which is a part of our job outside of the your third bullet point, the industry. But like we want to change people, we want to change ourselves through what we're doing. But I think what gets audiences into seats is where they find themselves in the world. Where if I need comfort because my home life is terrible or my society is terrible, I'm gonna go for comfort. I'm not gonna go to be taught anything because that may not be in my best interest. I and that's something that I wrestle with because I'm all about freaking learn the lesson. That's the hard stuff.
But I
But
feel like the same show can be both of those things
mhm,
to the audience person who needs that thing. Like
yeah,
it's so like it's
surprise.
a
It's a
beautiful
surprise.
multifaceted prism, and somebody might get that deep gritty educational whatever from the happiest sparkliest whatever that you've ever seen, and then on the flip side of that you can go into like some deep dark gritty like London Below whatever and have that beautiful, like my soul has been restored experience. And that looks different for everybody. And I think that that's what I love
That's
so
very
much
true.
about what we do is that it can be that, is that it is so self-contradictory in so many ways because it is so communal and so
Subjective.
personal. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, like there are some things that are like, yes, this is objectively good.
Hmm.
And Hamilton is objectively good. Hamilton is
Hmm.
also objectively problematic. It's both. Problematic fave exists as a concept for a reason. I think that, but it also got a lot of people, now they know history,
Hmm.
now they know In the Heights, and now Daveed Diggs is out here killing it, and people are looking at his old rap stuff. Like, that's great. I love that for everybody. And I think that what's so cool about theater as a medium is that it can be that. It is that versatility. I don't think there's anybody on this call who said that they were only one thing in this venue. And I think that that's because it's everything and it's all of it in the moment that it needs to be that.
Shelley, amazing Neil Gaiman reference, by the way. London Below forever. I
That was beautiful.
And I think that chasing that dragon is what every artist wants, right? We want our comedy that makes us think, and we want our tragedy that makes us laugh. And I feel like I go to see a lot of shows, and I feel like a lot of the theater that I see that leaves me wanting something is theater that's trying to be in all lanes at once instead of knowing what the story is and like committing to its tone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Twelfth Night is actually an amazing example of this. I really liked this production. I thought everybody was very good in it. I think that they had a big whiff on the ending, because I think that the betrayal of Malvolio is, we're about to get real inside baseball for anybody watching, by the way. I'm sorry if you didn't see the show at Chicago Shakes, but it closed. So let me cue you in.
Spoilers, the story's 400 years old. We're good.
The story is 400 years old. The betrayal of Malvolio, I think, is one of the most effective pieces of theater that we have, because Malvolio is universally disliked by design from the beginning of the show. And I think we have a lot of fun watching him go through what he thinks is his journey. And I think we all universally agree that when he reveals to the person that he thinks has been behind this the whole time, and finds out that it has nothing to do with her, I think we all universally agree that what happened to him was not fair. It was not proportional. It shouldn't have happened. There needs to be recompense. And he leaves the play. And I think him leaving the play is what needs to happen in that moment. And I think having him come back on stage with characters that didn't even see this occur, apologize to him, and then he sings a duet with the person who masterminded this thing, I really wish that they would have had the strength of their convictions to let that play out, because it didn't feel like a solving of a moment or a finding a new thing in the play. It felt like somebody who was uncomfortable with this dismissal at the end. And I trying to wrap that up felt like a note from the producer. I know that doesn't happen as much in theater as it does on television, but I'm a big proponent of theaters have seasons for a reason. If this play wasn't your flavor, come see the next one.
Yeah.
And I think trying to jam everything into every play, I think I think as an industry we're selling diluted product.
I agree. And I also think that when you've got Ashland cutting its programming down over a half, you've got Looking Glass going dark for a year, you've got Steppenwolf dumping 20% of their staff, you've got the New York Public dropping its stuff by 20%. Everyone is being told by the marketing experts that if the audience ain't leaving happy, then shut it down. And I am not saying I agree with that model and that's what we should be doing. What I'm saying is exactly what Shelley brought up before, which is everybody in this world went through a major trauma and we're not talking about it, and nobody wants to talk about it. And so there are people going to see The King and I for the 500th time because that's comfort food, the same way they're watching, oh my God, Doctor Who was the freaking best, last week, and it made me so happy. Comfort food. And unfortunately, because people are doing that left, right, and backwards in terms of mass media, the people who are doing the recommendations, and unfortunately in the industry we're in, the people giving the recommendations are the donors and the corporate sponsors and the venue producers, and they're all saying comfort food, comfort food, comfort food. I don't put that out there to say this is where we are, people, other than the fact that this is where we are, people. And it is, I think, looking for those problematic, beautiful, messy productions that get people talking about stuff and get people dragged back into theater again, because the numbers across the country right now are down. They're just down.
Shelley, did you want to say something really quickly?
I did, real quick. I think Steve brought up two really, really great things, and I want to touch on both of them. The one is that no, you absolutely shouldn't try to make one show all things to all people. That's a terrible idea. Don't try to shove it all into one bucket. I'm just saying that what you put in the bucket, everyone could get something different out of it. Um,
Mhm.
and where you screw it up is when you're trying to do too much. But I think if you have a clear, idea of what your story is, what your through lines are, what your, what the bones are, what the foundations are, you can do so much with that. And every single person in the room will get the experience that they
Right.
need
That
out of
was
that.
12th night, start to finish.
Hopefully, for sure. I also, speaking of the point about 12th night, I think what they did with Malvolio and the turn at the end was very interesting. But I'm a sucker for a good problem play, especially when it's Shakespeare, especially when it's the Shakespeares that don't make any freaking sense. Hot Pirate just disappears, and we don't ever. There's so much unresolved in Twelfth Night in the original text that I think, why not bring Malvolio back out? Why not just show how much of this is actually unresolved and how much of this ending doesn't make sense? It's like Cymbeline, but more known, because that's the one where Shakespeare's writing that on a fucking deadline. But I think, I don't know, that, like, I personally love Shakespeare's messier stuff. Um, Midsummer is still forever my baby, but like the Shakespeare problem pieces, and I think what they did with Twelfth Night just sort of highlighted that everyone thinks Twelfth Night isn't one, and it absolutely is. And I thought that they did a really good job of that by using that Malvolio's reappearance as a vehicle for it. So that was just the 2 points.
I I'm gonna kind of shift things. It sounds like all of us at some point talked about the pandemic and how, obviously it changed the world. And as empathizers, as artists, it certainly changed a lot in us and in our crafts. As you mentioned, Jan, there's a lot of changes that are happening in theaters, whether that's, completely shutting down the theater or cutting their season altogether or, cutting it partially. There's a lot of safety in seasons right now because, you know, board members and the powers that be are like, well, we need to make money. So we need hits, period. So we're getting a little bit of like safe theater. I just want to know from each of you. I'm going to start with Peter because I haven't heard a lot from you, if that's okay. How has the pandemic, and if you don't want to answer first, it's all good. How has the pandemic changed you as an artist? Um, based on what you're seeing, what you've experienced. Um, Obviously, you haven't given up the ghost. You're in Herschel right now. What did the pandemic do to inform you as an artist, good or bad, or both?
I think the first thing that comes to mind right now is I just want to try new things that I haven't done before. Part of why I'm doing Herschel right now. It's just a new experience to me. Um, and but I think to elaborate on what I mean when I say that is um uh what do
Is
I mean when
everybody
I say that?
familiar? Is everyone familiar with Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblet? Okay, cool.
Yeah. I think I want to do more weird stuff. Stuff that I wouldn't necessarily expect myself to have done in the past, cuz like in the past I've wanted to do um like Shakespeare and like mainstream like musicals and like Oscar Wilde and stuff like that, and that's sort of like my old perspective of what theater was, and it's this idea that it's formal and rigid and structured. Not to say that Herschel isn't structured. I wouldn't call it formal though. But I think I right now as an artist I just want to be doing things I haven't done before, and trying and experimenting and just playing with all of the tools that I have in my arsenal, and seeing what works, you know? So I
Was
think
it was there
that's
something in the pandemic that sort of triggered that, or it's just,
I don't think it was it wasn't something in the pandemic that triggered it. It was the fact that I took such a long break because of the pandemic, and now
mm,
I'm coming back without the uh without the notion that theater must be a particular way. And so now I feel like I'm coming back with more flexibility and more of an open mind to try new things. And I think that's how it impacted me most, I suppose.
that's awesome. It's really awesome. Anybody else care to share how the pandemic, what it may have
Yeah.
done?
I feel like coming into the pandemic, I felt like I had a certain amount of like career momentum, like coming into auditions, like looking at stuff. And mostly I was just trying to move from show to show. I was just trying to keep working. I was like, maybe if I work with this person, I can, have more work in the future. Maybe if I get in with this theater, I'll have more work in the future. And then that all vanished overnight. And I had and then I had 6 months of unemployment, which, thank you, federal government. That was a lifesaver.
You earned
But
that.
and I did, and then I got it back, and that's the important part. Uh, but I had to go looking for a job, and I had my resume that wasn't theater, and I had this interview that really impacted me. I auditioned, I interviewed with a real estate company that was looking for a sign installer. Don't get lost in the technical jargon. It's somebody that installs signs.
Mm.
And I ran through my experience running a tour and following logistics and keeping to a schedule, and I didn't get a second call for that job. And I got an email asking about a customer facing position that they were also looking to fill, and I was like, you just turned me down for the sign guy. Do you really think? Sure, I'm not doing anything, I'll go to this interview. um and about 5 minutes in, it became very clear that I was wildly underqualified for this job. And they said, well, do you have any references? And I said, well, Chris Jones said that I was particularly moving in 2018. Does that matter anymore? And they didn't laugh because they don't know who Chris Jones is. And so a lot of looking at my career now, it's trying to look at what am I investing in? Because being in a show is fleeting, and working with somebody doesn't guarantee future employment. So I had a friend reach out who was doing a sudden production of Mackers, and I got to be Mackers, and I got to make it the funniest production of Mackers that I could possibly imagine, because I think it's a murder farce, and they let me run with that. And Shattered Globe, which is a company I'm an artistic associate with,
Awesome.
did a very strange musical early in the year called London Road, which is a true crime docudrama musical. We all know the genre. We all have our favorites, but mine is London Road. And we won Best Musical. It was a very weird show, and it was a bunch of artists who had disparate skills that everybody had to learn new stuff, and it was great. And I haven't done anything since then. And I don't feel bad about that. When I feel bad about like where I am as an artist, I feel bad that I don't know what I want to do next. And it's a new thing to wrangle with, that I feel very fulfilled and taken care of as a person, because I've cobbled jobs together, and I go to see plays, and I see my friends, and I play D&D whenever I can. That's great. But it's weird being an artist and being mildly disinterested anytime I come across an audition posting. So that's what I'm dealing with right now.
I completely get that. I think pre-pandemic, and also just, theater is very much institutionalized in school, where it's like, when I first moved to Chicago, I auditioned for anything and everything that had a breakdown that sounded remotely like me. And after the pandemic, and we saw a lot of this not only in our industry, but there's a lot of people don't want to go back to work. People don't want to,
Yeah.
people are lazy, blah 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 blah. And I think during the pandemic, and not excluding our industry, people are like, for whatever reason, for this long period of time, I've been wasting so much of my energy and my time doing things that don't really fulfill me, that don't really matter, and that sort of that are basically just, that's I'm a slave to the man. Like I'm just doing all the shit that like the man needs, but it doesn't necessarily fulfill me. And I think the pandemic for a lot of us are just like, since we had so much time to ourselves or in our small bubbles, they're like, I am going to, now is my opportunity to make a change in my life, whether that's getting out of theater or getting out of this office job. And for someone, it sounds like myself, yourself, and also I think, what you were saying, Peter, what kind of theater do I want to be doing? What kind of work would I like to spend my time and my energy doing? And I think it part of that is scary because it's like I don't have that same like robotic energy that's like audition here, audition here, audition here, blah, blah, blah. Why am I not like, am I still an artist if I'm not auditioning in a show at every single moment? But I do think that also what you said spoke to me about um how the pandemic I think honestly solidified my artistry because I'm able to say, no, I'm not going to give you that. I'm not going to give you that time. I'm not going to give you that space. Because I care about myself.
I love that.
That's
And I'm so
beautiful.
glad you're saying that. That's because I had two projects that I was kind of excited about in the past 2 years that fell apart due to funding.
Mm-hmm.
And when pandemic hit, we can look at it and say, wow, it hit you as a woman at that exact point in your career where you're going to midlife crisis anyway, because you're going from the queens to the crones, et cetera, et cetera. But I look around now and I mean, I look at the hamster wheel I've been on for 10 years, trying to make sure that I did justify my existence in 1,000 words to get someone to give me $500 so I could just pay the next bond issue, from the union, or, all of that. And what pandemic did to me is I just want my artists to be safe. I want to have a room where everyone knows you're going to be in this room, you're going to be safe. And at the end of the week, you're going to get a paycheck and you're going to go home and you're going to cash it. And that means that you're safe because you have a place to sleep tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And believe me, when I was going through my BA and I was getting my MFA and I was coming up as a baby actor, those were not the thoughts on my mind. The thoughts on my mind were getting in good with the big kids and, making sure that I was working with great people and I was going to make some great art. And now I'm like, okay, how do we fund this reindeer game to make sure that all of these people who trust me when I give them a job actually get paid at the end of the day? And pandemic for me was like a hammer coming down and saying, we got to figure something out in this country. For years, I have been, bothering the unions about how we need to be talking to Congress about getting a cabinet level position in the arts. And people look at me and they're like, that's a crazy thing. And I'm like, it's not a crazy thing. Do you realize that Pete Buttigieg in transportation, how much money he managed to get pushed into different projects because he was charismatic enough? And the arts make a lot more money for this country
way more charismatic
than transportation.
Yeah.
And we don't have that. Wow, this is a really weird runaround for me to get to the point where I'm saying I think one of the
That's
things
my first time hearing that.
Pandemic did to me is it makes me think we need to be activists a heck of a lot more than we are, and we don't want to be. Because we're artists, so we want to tell a story. We want to, tell the story great. We want to be interesting and, suggestive and have this moment and connect with our audience. We need to be advocates for the arts because the arts are being cut in schools And according to the National Endowment for the Arts, the biggest indicator of whether or not a person will choose theater as a viable entertainment option when they're an adult is if they saw live theater as a kid.
Yep.
If you didn't see live theater as a kid, you don't even think of this as a possibility. So we need to be in the schools. We need to be putting up the shows for the kids. And the way to do that is to get funding from the government. And the way to do that is to have a cabinet level position in the arts. And oh my God, I'm going to thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I'm going to jump off my soapbox right now. But as someone who has written more grants than I can tell you at this point in my life, where it's justify your existence in 2,000 words.
Yep.
I gotta tell you, we need to be out there going, this is important. Without empathy, we become what we don't want to live with. Without empathy, our kids don't learn STEM and STEAM. Hello, friends, STEAM. Without empathy, yeah, I just talked myself into a corner. All right, pick it up, Shelley. Okay. Run with the ball.
Cool. To Jan's point, empathy is what makes us human.
Thank you.
And it's super important. We opened a show and then immediately Chicago locked down.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that was the first time in my life that an external circumstance got in the way of this. There have been all kinds of obstacles, all kinds of challenges, all kinds of, whatever. When my memoir comes out in 20 years and nobody reads it, it'll all be in there. But this was the first time that it was like, you're done, baby girl. And I was like, okay, cool. And there was nothing I could do about it. There was no workaround. There was no weaseling. There was no, well, I'll just try it this way and still get there. None of it. And that really sort of hammered in the idea that almost like a mortality kind of situation, like not knowing how much time I have left for any of this, right? Which is unfortunate because I'm almost at the age where they told me that I would be castable as everybody's mother. So that's unfortunate. But I think that it gave me some time to really focus on, instead of taking every freelance gig I could, I have a stable enough day job now where I don't need to cobble together a bunch of $200 stipends to pay the rent. I can be more selective in the work I'm doing. I can focus my energies where I want to. But I can also sort of had to take stock of, well, what do I want to do? What do I want to try? What haven't I done yet?
Mm-hmm.
Where do I want this to go? And I don't know, because I don't know what the options are, because they are infinite. And I want all of them because I want to try all of them because they're all part of the same sort of pieces of building all of the things that we talked about for the last hour, but also, y'all, the identity crisis that came with that. I was like, I don't know who I am without this. Shit, I'm gonna have to get a personality. I started painting D&D minis, and I got really into actual play podcasts because I needed to do something. And I needed the storytelling, and I needed the community, and I needed, all of the little bits and bobs of, the marrow of the bones of what we do, but also having to sit and evaluate, okay, well, we're dark. We're going to be dark for a while. And as somebody with several chronic illnesses, some of which live in my lungs or make me extremely susceptible to the respiratory vid, having to be a lot more cognizant of that when choosing what rooms to step into. Where, when all of this opens back up, do I want to work? Who do I trust with my safety? And who do I trust to align with my values of how I'm taking care of the actors as a stage manager, as a production manager, as whatever my affiliation with this production, this company, whatever is. And I was really grateful to previous me for deciding to freelance less even before the pandemic. But when it came down to the reality of having to do it, like of having to sit still and not work, that was rough. And I think that coming back out of it and spinning things back up, and getting into more of a regular cadence, the hardest part is rebuilding the momentum completely from zero. Because it is
Yeah.
like, oh, when in my process that I never wrote down do I actually enter the dates into the production calendar and share it with my designers? And it's like dumb stuff like that. That's all muscle memory. But because
Right. And the
I didn't
muscles went
use
to
it,
sleep for a while.
and the muscles are super asleep. Yeah.
Jeanette, you said you hadn't. I had said something, and you said I've never heard it phrased that way.
Oh,
What were
just
we
like
talking?
as an artist's council person, just
The cabinet
I
position?
a cabinet, yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Just I've done the show a little bit, and I listen to arts podcast, and
Mhm.
uh obviously I listen to people who advocate, people like me, but I've never heard of that specific of a position.
Well, I
um
just figure that we're always, gosh, in this country right now, let's all have our little late stage capitalism nod at each other. We're all go, that's where we are. Um, Everything that we do is being nickeled and dimed and is bottom lined.
I
The
will
thing is
shake my
with,
head to that.
yeah, with the arts, our bottom line is better than over half of the cabinet level positions. Why don't we have someone in there?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't know that we don't have that
Yeah.
either, which is its
They all
own.
think we're in Europe. What is that about? Sorry, that
And
wasn't a reel. That was snark. That was
yeah, yeah, and yes, I forget who said it earlier, but the arts, very largely, I was doing another show, we talked about, look at how much like Beyonce and Taylor Swift made for Barbie,
billions
Oppenheimer.
and
you
billions of
know,
dollars. Yeah.
there's quite a bit of money that we as artists bring in revenue to, our to our nation, and it's
Well, and
ridiculous.
and if you're wondering, last year, according to the NEA study that came out that is based on the numbers from 2013 until now, for every dollar that someone spent at a theater, they spent 37 other dollars in bars, restaurants, travel, et cetera, to get there. So
And that's
think
just the
about,
actors.
yeah, exactly. Nice. But I mean, think about if you're running a theater company and you have a $20 ticket, multiply that 20 by 37,
Yep.
and you've got the money that you're bringing into the tax base.
Yep.
We don't treat ourselves as engines of commerce. And I don't want to treat myself as an engine of commerce. Women get, arrested for that. But I do look at the numbers and I go, if this is the only way we get any respect out of this, maybe this is the way we need to start thinking about it. I don't want to. I don't like that. I want to sit in my room and I want to look at translations of obscure plays and figure out how to remove the sexual assault from them and still make them funny. That's what I want to do with my career. But in order to fund that, who have I got to go yell at? Who have I
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
make a sign and protest at their office? Who have I got to make 35 phone calls to? Because I feel like that's right now the job of an artist.
Yeah. Well, I think arts as activism has always been true. Always been true. But I think the interesting thing about it in America and in theater specifically, even going back 40 years, ACT UP in the AIDS movement, and even just like dialing it back just that far, arts as activism has always been a thing. Mural artists and street art that began as protest, and now, hey, the Chicago Reader best of street artists, right?
Street
Like,
art, right?
and I think that, well, I do not think that it is every theater artist's duty to do that work.
Yes.
I do think that it is important to understand, especially if you are taking on sort of a stewardship role within the community, if you are putting your name on posters, and if you are benefiting in some way from the revenue, or even if you are willing to sign off, frankly, on the work that is being done, you at least have to be aware of that. And I can't speak for anybody else, or at least I shouldn't, but I'm not gonna be like, oh yeah, we should totally just do whatever, I don't care, it doesn't matter, it all matters, it's all so important. Because again, it comes back to that safe space, it comes back to everyone deciding, who do I want to work with, who do I feel safe with, what companies do I feel care for me as an artist in the ways that it's a mutually reciprocated respect, and in, whether that's physical and mental health, whether that is with intimacy coordinators and directors, whether that is with cultures of consent, whether that is just with the vibes in the room, whatever that is. I think it is important for everybody to be very aware of their sort of pieces in that puzzle for everybody else, and those sort of like impacts and sort of stone throw ripples that they can have. And that's, sometimes I say things because I need to hear me say them as a reminder. So when I go back and listen to this later, that'll be for me, but it might be helpful for somebody else too,
Yeah.
Yep.
No, what you were making
and I think
sense.
that the activism is absolutely part of that. Whether, pick your flavor. I've chose all of these battles, and I will not be putting any of them down. But I think that that's very important for the way that I in the type of theater that I want to be involved in, and in the kind of writing that I want to be doing, and the kind of, slam poetry that I want to be popping off with. That's where it is. It's all sort of rooted in that. And I think that the more that we can kind of have the opportunities to blend those aspects of ourselves together, I think that that can do some healing for us on our own, given the late stage capitalism that we all have to cope with.
Great.
In the ways that we all find it for ourselves, obviously. But
I'm gonna say thank you, everyone. We've hit that time, y'all. I just want to say thank y'all for this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful conversation that we've had tonight. Um, Thank you, Kyle, for creating and producing the show and getting all this organized and stuff for us. Office Hours Global, Edwin Ruiz, and Mondo Machine. Thank you, Five. You guys is made possible by Stradog Theater, company ensemble members. We can only do things like this and seasons by generous donations from our community. We run on a free model, so if you care to help us, go to stradog.org and donate. Give us a little bit of money. We're run by the generosity of you guys. We'll see you next week for a conversation with more theater artists. Hopefully someday when you guys come back, because I feel like we literally could have continued this conversation for another hour. So come back, sign up, tell your friends, submit your questions that we may answer on the show. You go to shoutout.org, thank you five page if you want to submit somebody or submit questions. Thank you for watching. But before we go, I just wanted to give everybody an opportunity to recommend a book or a show or a song or what have you very quickly. Um, just for fun. I'll start. I'm currently I started a book club with some friends and very recently, and we are reading The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. It's about um, blacks and Jews living in Pittsburgh in like the night between the 1920s and 70s. Um, Jan, any recommendations from you?
Book that I just finished up because it was recommended was Tom Lake and Patchett's novel that kind of takes place in a theater company in Michigan. So there's that if you're interested. I also listen to the Folger Library podcast because I'm a geek that way, and because they're my friends. I love like listening into the interviews and stuff that are being done at the Reduced Shakespeare Pod, the podcast with the Reduced Shakespeare Company. There's lots of great interviews with Chicago artists and of all stripes and what they're doing and what they're up to. So those are the things that I'm currently listening to.
Awesome. Steve?
If you haven't seen Poor Things yet, go check it out. Yorgos Lanthimos does not miss. American Blues Theater is doing their annual radio play of It's a Wonderful Life. It is delightful. They are super talented and do a bunch of music stuff around it, and as well as the wholesome nature of the piece. Podcast wise, check out The Constant, A History of Getting Things Wrong by Mark Chrysler. It is a wonderful deep dive into things that we thought for a long time that were not correct. And he and his beautiful wife, Heather, are expecting their first child along. So give it a listen. And if you really like it, go to their Patreon because they could really use your support.
Peter?
Thing that comes to mind, you said song, so I'm going with that, but it's just the entirety of the soundtrack of Polly Bridge 2. It's just really chill, relaxing guitar music, and it just makes me feel super calm, and I love it. So that's what I'm going with.
That's awesome.
And also definitely check Peter out in Herschel and Hanukkah Goblins if you.
Oh yeah, I'm in that. Come see me. Do things. Right. Sorry. Yeah. Like still working on self-promotion and that sort of thing. I just always forget.
No, you're good. You're and Shelley.
I don't have anything that I can talk about right now because it hasn't been announced. But keep your eyes peeled on that for this spring. This book is super dope. I picked it up at Semicolon, which you should all go to, by the way. It is about protecting bookstores and why it's important, especially in this time of book bans. And I feel that this also expands to, as they call the type of work that we do into question and want to sort of ban that for whatever reason. This has been a great little read. Love that. Podcast recommendations. Look, okay, so Adventuring Academy, hosted by Brennan Lee Mulligan. It's a bunch of TTRPG gamers and DMs and things, and at a high level, yes, they're talking about D&D. At a more granular level, they're also talking about storytelling and narrative building and world building, and so much of that content is so, in a soft skills kind of translating way, so parallel to a lot of what we try to do, that I think that it's really lovely to just sort of have on and listen to people talk about that. Plus, everybody on it is really cool. And yeah, I was not prepared for that question. So
you had answers, so you're good, Shelley. I just again want to thank all of you guys for being a part of this. And to anybody that may be watching or watching later, hopefully you had, depending on whatever holiday you celebrate, Hanukkah's happening, Christmas will have happened by the next week, Kwanzaa will have started. No matter what you celebrate, if any of those or none of those, have a great one. Be safe. Be with people you love. See us next week on Thank You Five.